I'm joined by Angus Dalgleish, Professor of Oncology at St George's University of London. Angus, just to begin, you've worked in this for decades. It is still a word, isn't it? It's still the C word. It's still one of the things that nobody ever wants to hear. Mm-hmm.
But it's still, at the end of the day, it's just a word, not a sentence, as one of my colleagues coined it, and it's very true. My first reactions to this, I don't really know what it is from anybody else, but what I do know is that if a cancer is found by accident, as it were, and it sounds like, unless they've changed their diagnosis to a prostate cancer, it does sound like it was a very early cancer. And therefore, in my experience, whatever it is, whether it's something they saw through while they were doing this, then it is eminently treatable. And actually, that's a very good thing. You know, you can say, oh, it's terrible to come out with a cancer diagnosis, but to have one before you even, to have the diagnosis before you even know it these days is actually very good news, because our treatment is so good when it's very early, and hopefully it hasn't spread, and they're giving him a treatment. I don't really want to go and speculate all the different types, but in the pelvis there are many things that you can come across very early, and it's curable. And I strongly suspect and hope that this is what the case is, and that we shouldn't overreact to it. And obviously it's very worrying for him as an individual, but it is, all I can say, it is very, very common. I can't tell you the number of people in my family and friends, completely outside my professional practice, that I know have come across cancers early, often, sometimes as a result of going to hospital for trauma. And they discover something.
I mean, this is very much, isn't it? And I take your point that it sounds like it's early, and we hope it hasn't spread, and the treatment is far better than it's ever been. I get all of those points, absolutely. But in a sense, this is the benefit of going and having checkups and procedures, isn't it?
Oh, very much so, very much. And we know that if you pick these things up really early, and the screening, the outcome has really improved dramatically over the last 2 decades, absolutely dramatically. And the one thing where this is highlighted has been the tragedy of the lockdown, whereas people didn't get screened. And I know someone very, very close to me who didn't get his screening for 2-3 years, and then he's presented with what should not have presented had he not had the screenings cancelled. So this is another thing we're having to do.
I think, I have to say, Angus, I think that conversation will be taking place in families and pubs all over the country tonight. That we're delighted that we've discovered that the King has discovered this at a relatively early stage, but just how many people, and you say lockdown, but generally there are some quite big waiting times in elements of the National Health Service, albeit exacerbated by what happened. Do we match up to our neighbours in countries like France when it comes to cancer treatment?
No, I don't think we do. And I think one of the main reasons we don't match up is that we're seeing too many cancers present too late because of the waiting list, the waiting time. The problem with the NHS is once you get through to a good cancer unit, the treatment's as good, if not better, than anywhere else.
Is it? And you would stand by that?
Yeah, I would. It's getting through to it that's the problem. It's getting past the GP. Yeah. It is stopping them giving you one treatment after another for an infection, when it is actually saying something far more important than an infection's going on here. This needs urgent scanning. And then we find that people are waiting weeks, months for a scan, which should, in an ideal system, if I saw somebody had these symptoms, I want that scan within 48 hours so I can advise them. This does not happen on the NHS anywhere. And I think this is the big problem.
So the gap between what you can get if you've got the money or the insurance in private medicine and public medicine is enormous.
It is absolutely enormous. But once you get on the conveyor belt, as it were, for the treatment, whether it be chemotherapy, radiotherapy, it's every bit as good. It's getting access to it, which is the big problem. And that is what we need to sort out with the NHS. And I've been predicting the demise of the GP service for years, and now horrendously it's come true in front of us. And that means that you can't rely on going to see your GP to get your cancer diagnosis, you need to have some immediate access to a diagnostic centre. This is what I've been proposing for ages. You don't burden your GP, he's got other things to do. If you have certain symptoms and you have a blood test that has a red flag, or you have symptoms and it is for the time, symptoms for 2 weeks are nothing, or even 3 weeks, but it's when they go on, that's when you urgently need full investigation, and that's not, in my experience, it's not happening at the present time, and you need to have a diagnostic centre they can walk in, have their bloods, have their scans, have everything.
It makes perfect sense.
And the greatest thing is say, I'm so pleased, we've done everything that's necessary and there's nothing serious to worry about. Off you go.
That makes perfect sense. And, the King has cancer. It's a huge headline, it's a huge story, and yet how many of us at some point in our life will get cancer? Is it a third of us? Is it half of us?
Well, I think it's 1 in 2 now.
1 in 2.
I mean, it was 1 in 3 officially about 10 years ago, but I think it's now 1 in 2. We live longer. Well, up to now, we're actually now not living quite as long as the growth has stopped.
Yeah.
But we are being exposed to all the things that give us cancer, in the environment, in the processed food, etc. So more and more of us are going to get cancer. Hopefully, most of us will get it picked up early, treated, taken care of.
Well, I think, in a way, Angus, despite the deficiencies of diagnostics in this country, I think in many ways what you've given us tonight medically, we don't know the full facts, and you wouldn't speculate on that, and that's very responsible. The tabloid press will do that, I'm sure. But I think in many ways what you've given us is a rather upbeat, optimistic assessment that we're getting really rather better at dealing with this disease. Thank you very much indeed.